Hi, and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. Today, we are talking all about inner child emotional sabotage. Now, do you realize how often your inner child uses your emotions, such as fear, anger, shame, to trigger you, manipulate you, and keep you stuck? Now, this can be in all aspects of your life and affect your life goals, your money goals, your relationship goals. So in this teaching, we're going to be unpicking why your inner child works against you in this way and what you can do to stop this self-sabotage cycle. Okay, David, so let's begin with getting absolutely clear with what we mean about the inner child.
Well, I think it's a good thing to do, especially for the new subscribers. So when we're talking about the inner child, we're talking about a part of your mind. Now, you may already recognize this part of your mind and give it a name, such as your ego, your emotional mind, your subconscious mind, or some people call it the devil sitting on the shoulder. And that mind that's always criticizing, always finding fault, always belittling you, always knocking the skids away from you. So I think a better term to call it, and we'll understand why in this video, is the inner child. And why I like this terminology is because this part of your mind forms normally between the ages of around 6 to 9, around that time, not exactly, but in that area. And this is the time in your life when you were maturing and your emotional state was fully mature and you were experiencing emotions, but your cognitive reasoning hadn't matured to the same ability. So one thing or a series of things happened to you that you was not able to cognitively understand or to figure out or to work out what was happening. And then you said something to yourself, very important. So important, I call it the vow, VOW, the vow. Now, the vow is when something is happening. It could be one thing, or it could be a series of things, dysfunctional family, bullying at school, anything really, problems with your siblings. And you said to yourself, it must be me. Now, you may have said this in many ways, but there's something wrong with me. And when you say that, that kind of sets the compass, the roadmap. And now you have to start to view everything from this idea that there's something wrong with you. You're deficient, something missing. You need something. You're a victim. There's something you want from outside. And so then it develops what we call, and we'll probably talk about today, the 3 lies. The 3 lies are very important in the inner child work, Alex. And I can tell you nearly every one of my clients will say one of these or all 3 of these lies. I'm not good enough. I can't cope. I'm unlovable, or I'm unworthy. And then finally, those lies and that mindset, that mind space creates a kind of a filter. And then everything that comes to you in your life, every incident, every issue, every situation, right up until now, you're viewing through that filter.
Yeah.
And so you don't view it truly, honestly, with integrity. You view it skewed.
Okay, and for new listeners, we've done several teachings on things like the inner child vow, childhood trauma, that will help give you an understanding of those kind of foundational experiences which set the kind of the track for the rest of our life if we're not careful. And I will put links in the show notes to those teachings for you so you can get to know them and understand them in your own time.
But more importantly, though,
Mhm.
apart from setting the kind of the roadmap, it spiritually creates something much more important. It creates a separation. It creates a separation is in yourself when you hear this critic, this inner dialogue going on. So when you attempt things or when something happens or a challenging situation happens, instead of you addressing it as a full person, you're kind of addressing it
Through your inner child
through the
only.
inner
Yeah.
child's eyes.
Okay. So yeah. So we've from what you said, David, we experience some form of childhood trauma. So it could be a minor trauma or it could be a major trauma. But it's important enough to us that it creates this vow, it sets the 3 lies in place. Now, and we carry that with us from our childhood years in our mind, because that's what we're talking about, this part of our mind that we call the inner child. And now we find ourselves as an adult. And the topic for this teaching is how that part of our mind uses our emotions against us, presumably as a means to an end, a means for some sort of survival. So how do we know? What are the main ways that you have observed through your clients that their inner child is using their emotions to get something?
And that's exactly why I like the terminology of the inner child. Because those of you who have physical children and ourselves, every human being, will use. Now, I like the word manipulate. All children manipulate with their emotions. They'll have temper tantrums. They'll cry. They'll sulk. They'll go off on one. And this is when they're using their emotions to get what they want. And so all children will use their emotions. It falls down, it gets confused because they do not accept that they create their emotions. So think about this. All children will use their emotions quite happily. If you have physical children, you've seen it. If you tell them to go to bed and they don't want to go to bed, they'll sulk or they'll cry or they'll play up or they'll have a temper tantrum. Well, that's the emotions, and they're using the emotions to get you to back down, to get their own way, to win the argument, to get what they want. Very childlike. And the inner child part of your mind, it doesn't matter how mature you are, how intelligent you are, it doesn't matter where you are in your life journey. If you have this little kernel, and the Chinese think about it like the middle of a nut, like a kernel that's fixed. And the one characteristic about the inner child, it's really stubborn.
Yeah.
If you've got a physical child, try and get it to do something it doesn't want to do. It digs its heels in. You'd have to drag it along the ground. It causes a big rumpus because you want it to go to bed on time and it wants to watch something on television. And so you want it to stop playing the PlayStation and it's in the middle of a game. So this is why I like the analogy and the metaphor of the inner child. I think it really covers it much better.
So, David, are you saying that when we experience extreme emotions such as fear, anger, or shame, that more often than not, this is our inner child creating these emotions for some purpose?
I am saying that, Alex. I am saying, in my experience, you can't say 100%, of course, but I would say, and I've been doing this job for 45 years, I would say the majority of the time, when you're experiencing an emotion, as Alex says, anger, fear, scared, frightened, whatever you want to call it. That's why I prefer the name a red light emotion, a negative emotion. When you're experiencing a red light emotion, I would say nearly always the inner child is involved. And in my empirical understanding and working with clients, it's always involved. It's always the inner child part of your mind. And that's why you can't understand it. That's why it seems bizarre to you that you would act in a way that even you know is wrong. But this is an overwhelming power. It's almost like
Yeah, well, it is.
too
It's
powerful.
very, our emotions can and often are, do overwhelm us. They stop us in our tracks. They stop us from thinking logically, rationally, using our own experience. They stop us from using our authentic intuition. They take up all our energetic space in our mind and body, and they become the focus of our attention.
Exactly.
But David, I just know that a lot of people are going to say, yeah, but sometimes if I experience fear or if I experience anger or a red light emotion, it is a natural and authentic response to something that's going on. So are you saying it's more about if you consistently experience fear or you consistently experience anger and that you are just unable to shake it off? Is there a kind of a tipping point, or how do we know the difference between what is a natural, authentic response to, say, I don't know, a dangerous or a harmful situation, and we experience fear, or a situation where someone has really wronged us, and it's entirely appropriate to experience some sort of anger for, even if it's for a short period of time?
That's such a great question. And that's the number one question I often speak to my clients about is, I am not saying you should not experience red light emotions. I'm saying emotions are absolutely natural, normal. They're wonderful. They're the best part of you, probably, to be in your emotions, to experience your emotions, but they shouldn't be driving you. They shouldn't be the basis of how you make your decisions. Instead of being the victim to your emotions, I want you to be able to interpret your emotions. The teaching here is pivotal, so important, is you are the creator of your emotions. I know I repeat it on every video. I know you've probably fed up of me hearing it, but this is life-changing. This teaching, you are the creator of your emotions. You are not the victim. And so many of my clients, quite rightly, will say, well, it's normal, it's natural to experience fear, being scared, being frightened. And I say, absolutely, but that shouldn't be the basis of your decision making. And they'll say to me things like, oh, I know, I know this isn't the way, but what other way? You use your intellect, you use your knowledge, you use what I would call Shen, your spirituality. And when I'm talking about spirituality, I'm not talking about something supernatural, invisible, out of the way. I'm talking about something that defines who you are, that characteristic that is not material. You're right, I can't show you a bottle of spiritual Shen. But if you think about, and I do this most videos, if you think about somebody you really love, a child, a partner, a brother, a sister, a mother, a father, somebody you really love, and if I asked you to describe them to me, first of all, you'd start describing their physicality, the color of their hair, the way they talk, walk, the way they live. But then if I said to you, is that all they are? And you would say, no, of course they're not. My child is not just what you see. There's something else about them. And that's what I would call Shen. Not supernatural, nothing to do with angels or crystals or anything. A very important part of who you are. And everybody has got that. Everyone has got that non-material part of them that really, I want you to connect back to that. Now, you may call that intuition. You may call that your creativity. You may call that authentic, whatever word. There's so many words, but you know it's there. And I want you to start making decisions from that, not from the emotions that you create.
Yeah. And for people, individuals who are trapped in this cycle of emotional sabotage or going along with their inner child's emotional sabotage, we're not just talking about one incident that they are swayed or led by their emotional responses. We're talking about a pattern of behavior. So we're not just talking about a red light emotion of fear that arises in an isolated incident. More often than not, it's a constant, it's hopping from one emotional situation to another, and that becomes the pattern and the kind of roadmap for their life.
Well, in our model, we call it the carousel of despair.
Yeah.
You're stuck on a carousel. You keep on repeating the same things happen to you. You call yourself, this is hopeless, I'm lost, I'm being dragged down, I'm the victim, I've got to look outside of myself. I'm really worried about what other people think about me. This never works. I'll never be successful. I have no worth. I have no value. I can't cope with this. I'm not good enough. So if you've said any of those, you're on this carousel. And you, as the spiritual person, is not in control. This part of your mind that we want to label the inner child, that is the one that's in control.
So I want to drill down again as to why the inner child wants to be in control and why it's using the emotions in this way. You mentioned that obviously as children, a young child just wants its own way. It wants what it wants. And I can see how the inner child can use our emotions to kind of pull on us to mommy, daddy, I want this. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to budge. I want it now. And it can create the emotions within us, even though the inner child doesn't believe it's creating them. Its agenda in that sort of situation is, I want what I want and I want it now. How much of this emotional game playing is just simply the inner child wanting our attention, that part of our mind that we've maybe neglected, ignored, suppressed, buried because we don't want to go there, we don't want to think about childhood traumas? How much of this emotional sabotage is the inner child just simply wanting to get our attention?
A great deal of it, Alex. Again, you can't be precise because everyone is slightly different. But I would say from 50% of my clients, perhaps even more, the problem is they don't listen. They don't know how to deal with that part of their mind. And that's why I like the metaphor and the analogy of the inner child. This is how I see it. I see that part of your mind as your spiritual child. And you're the spiritual parent. Now, this child did not get parented correctly for many reasons, and we don't need to go into that. I always say I'm not here with my clients. I'm not here to dish or to criticize your parents. We're here to deal with the situation. So that part, when you were a child, you had issues with your parenting. Now it's your responsibility as the spiritual parent to parent yourself, to parent your child. And as you quite rightly said, the child kicks up a fuss, creates fear, scared, being frightened, locking themselves in. And you as the adult do not parent it, do not deal with it. What you do, you turn your back and you try and push it away, ignore it, go on the carousel of despair, create more confusion, blame other people, make yourself the victim, and you do all of this, and the inner child is there, stuck like that kernel of the nut. It can't move. And I often say to you, when I do the inner child work, and we go down the golden thread, the technique to speak to the inner child, I've never yet once found a monster. I've never once found some devil. I've just found a very scared, stuck little child that needs someone to speak to it, that needs someone to answer its questions, to need someone to communicate. It's like finding your child. This is how I often visualize it. When you get through all of the difficulties of the golden thread and the determination and the stubbornness and the blocking techniques, and you find your way down, and there you find a beautiful child huddled in a corner, frightened, scared, stiff, not knowing how to deal with life and believing that they're by themselves and not knowing who to trust. And ask yourself this. Can you really trust yourself? Can your child trust you? Do you listen to it? Do you parent it? Do you hold its hand and gently walk the way out of that dark place together as a team? And that's why we do these videos, for that process. You find the child, you talk to the child, you answer the child's questions, and you and the child come out together as one, not separate, as one.
And so what you're talking about there, David, is reparenting work, inner child reparenting. And again, we've done many, many teachings. We're sharing some helpful practical techniques to help you do this kind of reparenting work. And I can put links to some of those teachings in the show notes. And just to pick up, you mentioned golden thread. What you're referring to there is your therapy model, the golden thread process, which is where you're working down with the client from the surface level, painful, uncomfortable, red light emotional feelings, and getting down through the thought processes, through the core beliefs, right down to that is stuck inner child, and then beginning the reparenting work with it. And that essentially is the golden thread process that you work through with all of your clients.
And it's very difficult, Alex, because that part of your mind that we're calling the inner child has lost trust. And so that's one of the reasons why they create the emotions, because the emotions is like barbed wire. It keeps everybody at bay. And then the child learns, better the devil you know, better me protected in this dark corner than to go out in the real world, you see. And that's why it doesn't sit there and know that it's using the emotions, but it never accepts that it creates the emotions. And so many times my clients say to me, of course, intellectually, David, maturely, as a grown-up, I know I create the emotion. And then they use a 3-letter word. But. No, there can't be a but in that. You either accept you create your emotions, or you don't accept you create your emotions. And what they're saying is, I accept it as a mature, intelligent person, but this part of my mind doesn't accept it.
But David, I do wonder though, if I place my thinking now into the energy of my inner child, I'm kind of thinking my inner child's not particularly interested on whether it's creating the emotions or someone else is creating the emotions. All my inner child is actually fixated on is getting what it wants. So whether it wants my attention, whether it wants its own way, whether it wants to avoid a situation that it's concerned about, it's the emotions are a means to an end for the inner child. My inner child's not really interested in analyzing where the emotions come from. So it's kind of like, well, why would I be interested in spending time thinking about that? Because all I want to do is get a result. I want to get the result I want. I want to get me, adult Alex, to do what I want.
That's a great question. That's a wonderful question. And that's why I love the analogy of the inner child. Because, Alex, what you said there was absolutely right. But what the child needs more than anything is education. None of your physical children say, hey, let me go to school. They want to stay at home and play on the PlayStation and eat chocolate and watch television all day and have their own way. Of course they do. And that's why the analogy of the inner child is really powerful. But we have to go there. We have to get through the emotional block that the child has given you. And then you have to be able to talk to it and educate it, because all of the things that it says it wants, I'll just pick one thing you say, I want my own way. Perfect. The problem is, in the reality that we live in, it can't have its own way.
Yeah.
Now, here's a typical problem. Here you have one side, the inner child wants its own way, and now it's functioning in the reality, in real life, whatever you want to call it. It can't have its own way. So it sees this, what I call utopian, this Disney world, where everything works out the way that it wants it. Everybody's nice, aren't they? Everybody agrees with it. Everybody treats it like a little princess. Everybody looks after it. It gets everybody works out right. Isn't that beautiful? The trouble is that's not the reality it lives in. And so constantly you're having this. It's like I often think of it when I'm working with my clients. You see those pictures with two butting steers banging their heads against each other. You have reality, real life, getting on with your family, with your career, with your love life, with all of those type of things. And then you have this child going, well, it's not fair. It's not fair. This isn't the way it should be. I want it this way. I want it that way. And so all the while, you have that can only be described as an internal conflict, a fighting, which is what? Red lights. That's what red lights are. So instead of living your life in flow, and that's what Wu Wei means, living in flow, living effortlessly, enjoying your life, you're not. Even though in the surface, you may put on a mask that you're ultra calm and ultra in control and doing well at your career, at your parenting, in a relationship, but inside you're torn up. You're fighting, your stomach's going, and your chest and your heart's beating, your palms are sweaty, and you've got weak legs and your head's spinning around and you can't sleep and you're eating too much or drinking too much. And this is what we want to deal with.
And I think like the inner child knows that by using the emotions, we end up in an even worse emotional state. So a more mentally and physically debilitated state. And yet the inner child does, I think, see some sort of small wins in that.
Yes.
I've used the emotions in, say, this relationship situation, and I've got them to do what I want to do, or I've got myself to hold back and not push myself forward to play safe. So it kind of, in some ways, it holds on to like weak evidence that using my emotions to sabotage myself or sabotage my relationship or sabotage my life goals or to keep me playing small has forced people to do what I want or to kept me in my comfort zone where I've kept myself safe. It kind of contrives a kind of small wins out of this weird, inauthentic life strategy. But it hasn't got the maturity, the spiritual kind of insight or wisdom to know that, yes, but darling, you are so badly compromising your life. You are so badly staying in relationships that are unhealthy. You are so badly holding back your life goals, your money goals, your potential, all because you want to hold on to this emotional sabotage strategy.
That's very well explained, Alex. And a lot of my clients will say that and they don't understand. So let me answer your question. The inner child does this because it favors the familiar, the known. It dislikes the unknown. So here's the bizarre thing that Alex just said. The inner child will take a path, even though it's not successful, even though it knows it's not going to be successful, because it's known, and it lives in the hope, because it uses the only tools it has, that if it creates enough emotions, outside world will bend to what it wants. And so rather than stepping into the unknown, stepping into reality, taking responsibility, being accountable, the inner child will go down the known. Worst case scenario. Oh my goodness, if I had $1 for every client that says something to me like, well, it's better to think the worst, isn't it? Because if it happens, you're more prepared. This is nonsense. If you think the worst, it's more likely to happen. And you're smiling because you know this is true. Yet the inner child doesn't see that. It says, well, I'm kind of used to the worst. And then I can go to the three lies. Poor me. Poor me. There's evidence I'm not good enough. And I love what you call it. I call it the self-fulfilling prophecy. You call it a better name, confirmation biased. So the inner child goes, there you are again. Look what happens. They've left us again. We didn't get that promotion. Look what happened. It didn't work out the way we wanted to. Poor me. It means I'm not good enough. It means I'm not worthy. There you are. I told you I couldn't cope. And so you live on this carousel of despair, like a hamster's wheel, going round and around and around, and not living to your true potential.
So if we're in a relationship, or if we're working, or if we've set us a life goal or a money goal that triggers or touches upon a inauthentic belief the inner child is holding on to, like, I'm not lovable, I don't deserve this, I'm not good enough, I'm not going to be able to cope with this. All those things which can apply to relationships, money goals, lifestyle goals, career goals, health goals, anything. Rather than the inner child coming to us and having a healthy child-parent conversation that, I'm worried about this, or what if this happens, talking about things it's imagining that are going to go wrong. The inner child is just creating emotions. Oh, fear, anxiety, anger, shame, whatever, and presenting those on a plate to you. And we are, at the moment, in the habit of just reacting to the emotions and saying, right, okay, well, we're going to completely avoid doing this.
Exactly.
Or we're going to completely try and manipulate this other person to placate you, my dear inner child. But what we need to be doing, I think from what you said, is encouraging a more authentic dialogue, encouraging the inner child to come to us with its concerns, not with just high-level emotions, but starting to talk to us in a way that we can now have a two-way conversation with the child and start to pick apart what is behind the emotions that the inner child is creating.
That's the number one thing, Alex. So many of my clients, they live their life and they're almost proud of it. They'll say to me, well, I'm a very emotional person. Oh, I'm very emotional reactive. And they will use their emotions as almost like a badge of honor, where I would like you to be a more spiritual person, to work from your truth, from your honesty and your integrity. So you say what you mean and you walk the walk and you talk the talk. So for instance, if your boss is, bullying you, and I'm just thinking about a client just last couple of days who said that they don't like confrontation. Let me repeat. They don't do, that's what she said. I don't do confrontation. And I said, why? Well, I don't like it. And I said, well, why don't you like it? And she said, well, it's just everybody shouts and screams and they argue and I don't like it. But I said, well, they can do it, can't they? What we have to do, what I have to teach you is if somebody else can't control their emotions, that's actually giving you a great advantage. Because I'm a great believer in confronting, not confrontational. Confrontational means two people have lost their ability to discuss things logically. So if you go into your boss and he blows his top, wouldn't it be far more powerful for you to connect to that inner stability, that Shen nature, that truth, that honesty, that integrity, and don't jump in with him. You just sit there and say, well, I can see you're upset. Do you want me to come back later and we can have a talk about this? And she said, I couldn't say that. And I say, why? Well, he'd blow his top. I said, well, let him blow his top. You're not blowing. You're not making him blow his top. So you're not engaging in this emotional table tennis game.
Yeah.
You're in control of your emotions. Because somebody else isn't in control of their emotions, that's not your responsibility. Because if you go back to the original teaching, you are the creator of your emotions. You are not the victim. Now, if you start to think about that, that means that other people are the creator of their emotions. You are not responsible. And this teaching is very important, Alex, for the inner child. Because a lot of my clients, I would go majority of my clients, have believed when they were a child, is this you? That they were responsible for their parents' emotions. Yeah. And did your parents say anything to you? You drive me crazy. I'm at the end of my tether. I'm out of my mind because of you. And see, the child then thinks, well, oh my goodness, it's me. I'm not good enough. There's the vow. I'm not good enough. There must be something wrong with me. If my mother and my father or my carers can't deal with me, it can't be them, can it? It must be me. And there's the inner child.
And I can see that certainly that is one reason why we need to ensure our inner child understands this principle of you create your emotions, you're not a victim of them. Other people create their emotions. They are the victim of their own emotions. You do not create other people's emotions. And I think, David, that once we grasp that and once we grasp the teachings that we talked about today, wow, is it so much easier to see the inner child in other people and reach a level of acceptance with their behavior insofar as we understand it. We don't have to put up with it, but at least we can see where they're coming from. And then that helps us disengage. So in the example of reacting to the boss flying off the handle, that helps us then stay grounded in our inner stability, in our inner knowing, and not let our inner child's emotion get engaged with that other person's emotions. And we are in a much better, stronger, more authentic position then.
And that's why we do the teachings, Alex. Emotions are wonderful. Please never think that I'm saying you shouldn't have emotions. Don't have emotions. Cut yourself off from the emotions. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying be emotionally healthy, not dysfunctional. So using our example, if your boss can't control their emotions, her emotions or his emotions, and they've got a red face and steam coming out of their ears, then you can deal with that because you don't have to jump into his emotional cesspit and be dragged down in their emotions. And so a lot of my clients will use words like, well, I'm hypersensitive. But that's good then. I see sensitivity as a positive. That means you can sensitively deal with this person when they've been dragged down in their emotional cesspit. Yeah. You can use your sensitivity correctly, properly, authentically, spiritually. You can now deal with that situation truthfully. And it might be, in our example, that perhaps this isn't the job for you. This isn't the position for you. So you can analyze that. And you can go and find your own way to find another position, to find another place, to do something. Not emotionally reactive, but emotionally healthy. Yeah. Using your emotions in the correct way, using your sensitivity, using your authenticity. And I often say in these videos, one word I love is inspirational. To be in your spirit, be inspirational for yourself.
And I can see, David, this principle, we talked about the situation with the boss at work. This is even more powerful and more important in our personal relationships. So if we are in a relationship with someone who's using their emotions, their inner child is using their emotions to get their own way, to manipulate us, that we need to not engage with the inner child. We need to give them space and say, I'll give you some time out. We'll come back and we'll talk about this. And to dig down as to what are the underlying reasons of what do you actually want here. But really, they need to be encouraged to do the inner work for themselves, because it's not our responsibility to do their inner child reparenting, inner child work for them.
But it is our responsibility to be consistent. So if you say to your partner, look, we're not going to get anything done now because you're emotional or I'm emotional or but we'll talk about it later. So many of my clients never talk about it again. You must see back to truth, honesty, and integrity. If you say, well, we'll pick this up tomorrow or we'll pick this up later when we both calm down, then you must pick it up later. There must be a consistency, because that consistency that I used to call and still do call discipline, you have to be able to be true to yourself. You have to connect to your Shen. So if all those around you are losing their heads, you have to be even more focused on connecting to your Shen. Now, the inner child will want to pull you into the emotions. And the inner child will be saying, well, that's not fair. They shouldn't talk to you like that. That always happens to us. You see, this is just another reason. And that's when you have to, as you say, reparent the child. And we've done many videos on reparenting the child, because this is something you do not in the moment. You do away from the moment. You do in your own time. I would call this meditation. That's how I see meditation, a way of focusing yourself, a way of being in control of yourself, a way of being able to understand the role that your emotions play and make sure they're healthy and they're not dysfunctional. And above all, make sure that you are not the victim of your emotions. Just think about that just before we finish. How can you be the victim of emotions that only you create? Only you are creating the emotion that you're feeling. Nobody else can put a feeling into your body. So if you're creating it, how can you become a victim of it? And that is a really important question for you to meditate on. Sit quietly. And if you disagree with me, then put it in the comments. We talk about this all the time in our Facebook community group. And we talk about these things, and other members will share their views, and you can express how can you become a victim of emotions that only you create.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Wow. Well, we have covered a lot of ground there. And as I say, I'll put links in the show notes to many, many more teachings that will help you on this subject. But I hope you have now got a much fuller understanding of how your inner child uses your emotions to sabotage many aspects of your life, and how to undo this unhealthy habit so you can live to your truest potential in your most authentic way. If you have enjoyed the teaching, please do let us know, and maybe share it with someone else who you think would also benefit. David works every week by Zoom video call with clients all over the world on these sort of issues. And if you are interested in learning more about David's one-to-one consultations, I will put a link in the show notes about those as well. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new teachings every week, and we would love to share your journey with you. Bye-bye.